Thank you for joining us today for Helping Members Report Accomplishments, a webinar for AmeriCorps VISTA leaders. I'm your host, Eric Powell, a training specialist with the VISTA program at AmeriCorps headquarters in Washington, D.C. I'm joined today by my colleague, Andy King, our main presenter, who is a senior training specialist here at VISTA headquarters. In addition to being very knowledgeable and relatable, Andy plays several roles in supporting VISTA leaders, not only through this webinar series, but also through his work on VISTA leader orientation and in developing resources for the VISTA campus. Andy, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Eric. I'm happy to be here to talk with you about this topic, which, though it might not be everyone's favorite, I think it's really important to the work of the VISTA program. I'm also excited to be joined by two VISTA leader guest speakers. So in this session, we'll hear from Tammy Moyer and Sebastian Pruitt about some of the things that they're doing to support data collection and reporting in their projects and how they help their members with these tasks. So let's take a look at what we'll cover. This session focuses on helping you in three areas. First, we'll discuss the importance of reporting for AmeriCorps projects and look at why that data matters. Next, we'll look at what gets reported to AmeriCorps and what some common pitfalls are. And finally, we'll discuss ways that you, as a VISTA leader, can support members with reporting. The webinar itself is organized into two sections. First, we'll start with some foundational reporting information, starting with why reporting matters and what happens to the information you collect for AmeriCorps. We'll give an overview of the types of data that get collected for the required VISTA reports, and we'll also look at some common mistakes that show up in those reports. With that foundation, we'll shift our focus and discuss the roles that VISTA members and leaders have in reporting. We'll look at ways to use reporting tools to standardize the process and show ways that leaders can guide and support members in submitting high-quality data. Okay, so let's get started with some foundational information about reporting on your AmeriCorps projects. And to get us started thinking about this, Eric is going to introduce our first activity.
And I'm very excited about this activity because it's such an important question. So if you have a minute, in the chat, we'd like you to respond to the question, why does high quality reporting matter? Certainly as VISTA leaders, you have a role in reporting, but why do you think reporting matters to your project and AmeriCorps? And why does high quality reporting matter? And again, as a reminder, so that everyone can see your answers, please make sure you select everyone before you submit your idea. Taking a look in the chat, seeing as responses come in. Again, we're looking for why do you think high quality reporting matters to you and to your VISTA project? And I'll read a couple of responses. It looks like a lot of things have coming in, overwhelmingly saying it reflects the progress of VISTA projects and it really shows what projects have accomplished towards their goals and towards their mission. And then another theme I see emerging is it really helps projects understand where they've come so they know where to go next in terms of project activities, in terms of VISTA assignment descriptions, really helping to understand where the project is going towards a successful end. Andy, what are your thoughts, or are you seeing additional comments?
Yeah, thanks for that, Eric, and thanks to all of you who've submitted your ideas. These are all really great. They've started to formulate, I don't know, into a few categories as I was looking at them. A number of you mentioned tracking progress, right? Like recording it and having a clear record of what's been done. Some of you also mentioned using that as a way to identify what else needs to be done or what barriers or obstacles there might be. And then others of you started to talk about ways you might use that information that you collect in your reports, like for reporting out to some agencies or the grant writing or seeking other forms of funding and support. So lots of very different categories and then some specific examples about them. So great work on that. Let's go ahead and look a little bit more closely about why reporting matters. So I'm going to quickly run through some ideas here. You've touched on many of them about why reporting is important. So briefly, you may have heard this before. If you accomplish great things but nobody knows about them, it's almost like they never happened. And through reporting, VISTA members, leaders, and sponsors can document and communicate the accomplishments of the project and show what the members have done and the impacts that they're making in the community. This also allows everyone to see the progress that's being made towards the results. So the AmeriCorps program can see how well the project is doing, and members can see their own progress. The VISTA reports also give sponsors an opportunity to identify challenges that have come up that may affect the project outcomes. And a couple of you mentioned this. And sponsors can also identify what types of assistance might be needed so that AmeriCorps can develop appropriate resources. And finally, the information in these reports helps tell the story of AmeriCorps. Information from reports is used across AmeriCorps to share program successes near and far. So let's take a quick look at how the reporting data that you collect flows through the AmeriCorps reporting system. Of course, it may work a bit differently at each project. So if you're not familiar with the process at your own site or project, you may want to check in with your supervisor. In general, it starts with VISTA members. They're the ones who collect information on their service activities, keeping track of their progress and outcomes, and documenting their results. They then pass along the information to the VISTA leader or to their supervisor if the project doesn't have a leader. VISTA leaders have two main roles. First, they support members with data collection and reporting. Then they compile the data, check it for errors. Leaders also report on their own service activities. So just like their members, they're running their own numbers and keeping track of their own activities. The leader then organizes the data so it's easy to review, and then they share it with the overall supervisor or the project director. That supervisor or project director analyzes the data, comparing it to the project plan and the milestones that were set out for the project. The project director is also the one who writes the official report and submits it to AmeriCorps. Once the report is received, AmeriCorps uses the information internally to measure and evaluate its programs, to inform its leadership and stakeholders, and develop resources and technical assistance, as well as planning for the future. AmeriCorps also uses report information to tell the story of AmeriCorps to a variety of audiences. Of course, Congress, as the appropriator, is very interested in knowing what's being achieved, as is the White House. So those are two primary audiences. And beyond that, AmeriCorps shares its results with other federal agencies, the media, and the general public. So that's just a bit about why we report and where the information goes. Now, you might think that the handful of numbers you track don't amount to much, but when you combine the accomplishments of members and leaders across the country, the results are pretty impressive. Here on the screen is an example of VISTA program results from the past year, which VISTA projects reported to AmeriCorps. Without accurate reporting, we would not have these figures. And since each of you has a hand in helping to record the great things that AmeriCorps is doing across the country, I'm curious to know what kinds of things you're tracking.
So we'd like to hear from you again. In the chat, you can go ahead and respond to the question, what types of data does your VISTA project collect? We know you may collect lots of different types or a couple, but what types of data does your VISTA project collect? As VISTA leaders, you work with members to collect and report data. So we're asking you to share any kind of data that you are requesting your members share with you, and you may include those in reports of any kind. Taking a look on the chat, looking at the responses coming in. It's great to see people are thinking and reflecting. It may be that you're not quite sure yet if you're a newer leader, what type of data your VISTA project collects, but I see a couple of responses focusing on collecting types of data around the number of students or the number of people impacted in the community, the number of volunteers recruited or managed, which I think is something probably the large majority of VISTA projects collect, since it seems like most VISTA projects work with volunteers and people in the community. And then I'll read off a couple more. A lot of people are collecting in-kind donations, the amount, the source of those donations, which of course is extremely useful to any organization. And then similar to that, the number and the types of community resources being utilized is something you definitely want to track for sustainability and different things beyond. Andy, I'll turn it over to you to comment on a few other ideas.
Sure. Thanks for that, Eric. And thanks for everyone who shared their ideas so far. Yeah, a lot of very different types of data being collected here. You know, some of them are very familiar probably to many of us, and we'll look at those in a minute, but like dollar values and volunteer hours, things like that. But also I was really interested to see a number of you talking about the community served, the recipients of or beneficiaries of services that are provided by the organization, looking at the needs that are out there and doing some kinds of assessments around that. So again, great variety of responses here. So I want to, while this is all fresh in our minds, I want to take a look at what AmeriCorps is asking VISTA projects to report on. And fortunately, there is a lot of alignment here. So from what we've just seen here, many of you know very clearly what AmeriCorps wants to get. But for those of you who are maybe newer to this topic or a little less familiar, we'll quickly review what gets collected. So information collected falls into two categories: numbers and narratives. The numbers, which represent some standard measures of what AmeriCorps members are doing and what the project is accomplishing. The narratives provide explanation of those numbers. So we'll start with the numerical data by looking at what the numbers are that you're expected to track. AmeriCorps VISTA projects are expected to report on things like member development, so to capture the amount of training and skill building that VISTA members receive. We also collect member activity information on things like the number of community volunteers that are recruited, the number of hours those volunteers performed. Likewise, we want to know how much money the members raised, along with the value of non-cash or in-kind contributions that they generated. Several of you mentioned these types of data in that last chat activity, so a lot of alignment here. Each AmeriCorps project selects specific AmeriCorps performance measures that are relevant for that project. For VISTA projects, those are capacity building and anti-poverty measures, as well as the specific beneficiaries that are served, like youth, veterans, substance abuse programming recipients, or homeless people. So your supervisor or project director will be able to tell you what the specific performance measures are for your project, so you'll know what data you need to collect. And as I mentioned, in addition to the numbers, there's a narrative section to some of the reports. So if the numbers tell us what happened, the narratives answer the question, so what? What do those numbers mean and what can they tell us? The narrative is the place to explain the numbers and to bring them to life. So this is where the project can describe their successes and indicate the impact that the project is having. This is especially important for things that are hard to represent with numbers. For example, a project may have a goal of creating a strategic partnership. Well, even if they're fully successful, that partnership gets reported numerically as a 1. The narrative gives an opportunity to describe how that partnership expands the organization's services. The narrative is also the place to talk about challenges that have come up, changes in the environment that weren't expected, and what the sponsor plans to do in response. Here too, the sponsor can describe training or technical assistance that's needed from AmeriCorps. So let's briefly look at the main AmeriCorps reports so you'll have some context for the data that you and your members will collect. You may already be familiar that there are 2 main reports that VISTA projects submit to AmeriCorps. The first is the Project Progress Report, or PPR. It includes numbers and narratives on project activities and results. There's a section on performance measures, which report the numbers in a more detailed way and compares them to the targets that the sponsor has set for the project. The PPR is submitted twice a year as the Progress Report semi-annual and the Progress Report annual. The other report is the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, or VPRS. This one is strictly numbers, and it collects the same data points from all projects. It looks at 4 overall areas: community volunteers, resource development, capacity building, and the people helped by organizations that were supported by VISTA. The VPRS is done once a year to report on the previous fiscal year. So for the federal government, that's October 1st to September 30th. Remember the numbers we just saw a moment ago? Those numbers came from the VPRS. All right, so now that you know a bit about what AmeriCorps is looking for, let's see what we sometimes end up with. So my colleagues in some of our regional offices and here at VISTA headquarters have identified some common reporting issues. And I figured since leaders and members are collecting much of the numerical data, it might be helpful to look at some of the issues relating to the numbers in reports. First is the issue of double counting, which can happen easily if you have more than one member working on a project or an event. Say 2 members are reporting community volunteers. Well, if both of them report all the volunteers recruited and you add those numbers together, then you'll be double counting. Another common issue is numbers that don't align from one section of the report to another. One project reported that members spent 300 hours on volunteer management, but then they showed 0 community members recruited and managed in the demographics section. Later on in the performance measures section, the report said there were 75 volunteers recruited and 40 managed. So this is an issue with the person who's actually writing the report, but it's essential to have well-organized data to begin with to help avoid this kind of error. A third issue that comes up is that of very high numbers that are hard to connect directly to member activity. A project with 5 VISTA members reported that almost 300,000 youth received services that were supported by those VISTAs. It's hard to see how 5 members could have supported services for so many. There are also issues that can come up around the narratives. First are narratives that don't support the numbers. And as an example of this, a project reported 50 youth mentor matches were sustained and 50 students improved their academic performance. But nowhere in the narratives under stories or partnership collaboration did the project highlight this. Another common issue is a report narrative that doesn't explain zeros that are in the numerical side of the report. It's really hard to interpret a report where several sites have 0% progress listed without any explanation. Is it because the members aren't doing anything? Or is it because members are doing something other than what's captured in the report? Or maybe it's a new site and they don't have any members yet, so that's why it's 0. Without a narrative, we would have no way to know it. A third general issue is a narrative written with a member focus rather than a project focus. It's easy to see how this happens. Members submit their narratives and the supervisor just pastes them into the report. But that's not what AmeriCorps is looking for here. The narrative should be written from the perspective of the project. Is it the project on track to meet its goals? What were the challenges for the project? And what resources does the project need to be successful? Again, these are issues that the project director needs to be mindful of, but a leader who's gathering the narrative information from members can help avoid some of these issues. All right, so now that we have the foundation of what VISTA projects need to report and some thoughts on how leaders can support that, let's look at specific practices that leaders are using. And to get us started, we'd like to hear how reporting is going for the members at your project. Eric will give us the details.
And it'll be helpful to surface some of the reporting challenges that your members might face. So we'd like to know, what are some things that you have noticed members struggle with related to data and reporting? In other words, what challenges do they face when it comes to submitting complete, timely, and accurate data? Is there anything in particular that they seem to need help with? Are there specific questions come to mind? In general, what things do you find your members struggling with when it comes to collecting data and reporting on that data? Give you a moment to respond. I know this might involve a couple of seconds of thinking. Some members struggle with keeping order of events and details during those events, which sounds kind of like tracking their progress on a regular basis so they don't have to forget about it later on and try to sum it up all together. Some of the members don't understand some of the wording in the report in terms of what it's asking for and what certain definitions are, which of course, as Andy pointed out, is a huge element when it comes to reporting, because if people don't understand what something is or what it means, it's hard to be accurate in reporting on it. And then I'll mention several members I see struggle with the narrative and trying to outline specifically in words what's been accomplished. Sometimes the quantitative part is easy, but the qualitative part is a little bit harder to articulate the achievements of the project. Andy, I see a lot of responses coming in, and some of these are really, really wonderful. What do you take from these responses?
Yeah, so I think these are pretty typical. So just to normalize these challenges, if your members are experiencing them, they're not alone. And the good news is I think there are several things that leaders can do to help members with these challenges. And some of it is maybe a translation role, right? Helping to take the jargon or the technical language from the report form and making that more understandable. The other is creating processes. We're going to hear in a little bit some ways that some of your colleagues have done some of that to help standardize it and streamline and simplify it. So this is really, I think, a good backdrop for our next discussion. So first, I want to shift and look at the roles that leaders can play in supporting members and then assisting the overall reporting process. Leaders are broadly tasked with several roles related to reporting. This is, of course, is going to vary somewhat from project to project, but there are some common areas where leaders can be really helpful. First of all, they guide and support members in reporting, and they manage the data. As guides, leaders train members on their reporting responsibilities and the specific reporting procedures at their project. They also support and encourage data collection. And thirdly, they explain and reinforce the importance of getting that data and getting it correctly. Leaders also implement effective tools and systems to support data collection and reporting. So this could take the form of spreadsheets or other forms and processes that are used to input the data. Leaders manage the data by compiling what members submit and then checking it for errors. And then leaders take all the report data and narratives, share them with the supervisor or the project director. So let's briefly look at how leaders can train members on their reporting responsibilities and the specific reporting processes at their project. Training about reporting should begin when the member starts, so it's a great topic for on-site orientation and training. You'll want to clearly define for your members what they need to be tracking. Provide clear definitions for all the data points so that all your members will collect things in the same way. And you may need to include training on how to use the specific reporting tools and systems that your project is using. Once the members are trained, leaders can help ensure they're collecting the required data on a regular basis. Reporting data collection often takes the form of reminding members to submit their data. It's rare that people love to track numbers, so all of us need some encouragement and reminders to take care of this important part of our work. And even though the AmeriCorps reports are typically submitted a couple times a year, you'll want your members collecting their data every week or two as it happens so that nothing gets lost. When it comes time to compile the report data, you won't be able to collect numbers from members who've already completed their service. So make sure they're tracking it in real time. You may want to collect data from your members at least every month so you can check data quality and follow up with the member while the information is still fresh. Encourage your members in a variety of ways if you can, and make it part of the routine. Include reporting on regular meeting agendas and in your newsletter to encourage them to collect their data. And when they do submit it, reward them with praise, recognition, or treats if possible. The next role that leaders can play is to explain and reinforce the importance, that is the value of data collection. Earlier, we talked about why programs report in general, and we looked at how AmeriCorps uses the information that comes in from the VISTA project reports. Make sure the members on your team realize how far their data will go once they're in the reporting stream. Reporting is a fact of life in most any workplace, so it'll be useful for members to learn about it during their service. Helping them see it as a regular part of any job will benefit them even after they finish. And leaders can show members various ways that the data they collect can benefit them. The old "what's in it for me?" The reporting can help members see the incremental progress they're making, which can be motivating. Or they can include their achievements in their professional portfolio to be used later on in a resume or a job application. So the three roles we've just looked at all focus on supporting members. Next, there are a couple of leader roles focused on overall project reporting. It's great to have members tracking their accomplishments, but if they're not collecting and organizing it in a standardized way, the information won't be very useful. So you'll need standard reporting tools if they don't already exist. Ideally, the tools will allow members to easily capture their data on an ongoing basis as things are happening. The tools should also make it easy to collect the data from all your members and compile it in one place. As the data come in, you'll want to check to see that all members have reported and that all the numbers are there. Doing this as it's submitted allows you to follow up in a timely way on anything that might be missing. You'll also want to check the data to see if they make sense. Look for outliers, numbers that seem too big or too small based on what you know about the project or based on other numbers in the report. Let's say a member reported building capacity at 90 organizations, but you know they're only working with 9. Follow up with your member to validate the data and make any adjustments needed. Likewise, you want to look for duplicates in the data. Say you have a couple of VISTAs working on fundraising, check to see whether they're both reporting the same funding in their numbers. And if they are, you'll need to make sure you don't double count. Finally, once the data are clean, you'll send it on to the supervisor or project director. They are the only one who will write and submit the official report to AmeriCorps. And they will also likely use the data in other contexts to share what the VISTA project is doing. All right, I know that was a lot. So this is a good place to bring in our guest speakers. You can hear about some of the things that they're doing to ensure effective reporting on their projects.
Tammy Moyer has been a food security VISTA leader since March 2022, serving United Way worldwide, helping to manage the PPR data for 10 food security VISTAs and 11 local United Way sites. She's offered to share some of the things that she does to support her members in data collection and reporting. Welcome, Tammy.
Hello, and thank you for having me. So when I was a VISTA, I didn't know about my reporting responsibilities until I needed to report them the first time. I had to go back to my weekly notes and calendar to identify the data to report with my supervisor. It took extra time away from my duties as well as my supervisors to review 4 months of my performance to acquire the required data. I didn't want my VISTAs or their supervisors to have that happen to them. And as a VISTA leader, I was able to help. To make the process of PPR data collection and input easier, I did the following things. Within the first week of a new VISTA's members service, I have an initial meeting with them and discuss what I like to call all things VISTA, including the PPR reporting. I also provide the reasons why data collection is required and important. I tell them that it basically justifies our existence. I review a detailed Excel spreadsheet I create for them and immediately email it to them after the meeting so they can use it to collect the required data for their year of service. I personalize each of their Excel sheets to include the dates the PPR is due and what their site's goals are for the year. I make sure to clarify that the site goal is shared among all VISTAs at their site. I also suggest they log activities weekly or for events immediately, instead of waiting until the end of the month. In our discussion, I also show them the Smartsheet form we use and explain when the next PPR is due and what our process is so there are no surprises. Next, I'd like to review a little bit more in detail about the tools and processes I use to manage data. To make things as easy as possible for my VISTA members, as mentioned earlier, I give them an Excel worksheet to use to keep track of their accomplishments as it pertains to the PPR. I ordered the columns to match the way the data is listed in eGrants, and I include the definitions for each requirement so the VISTA knows what to report. I have 2 sheets in the Excel worksheet that I send. One for their PPR data and one to keep track of their personal and medical days as a bonus tracker should they choose to use it. At United Way Worldwide, as we use Smartsheets, which works well for our PPR process. 4 weeks prior to the actual PPR date, I send the VISTA and VISTA supervisor separate emails reminding them that the PPR is due in 2 weeks, and I list that date. In the VISTA email, I remind them to review the data they've collected with their supervisor prior to submission to the Smartsheet form link attached. In the VISTA supervisor's email, they are reminded that they will need to review their VISTA's data prior to submission, and I remind them of the questions required of them. We initially were working with 11 local United Way sites, so at the top of the form everyone submits includes site names and member and supervisor names on dropdown so they can tag themselves and their sites. The VISTA member form also has a required open field for data that requires more details, such as project accomplishments and other AmeriCorps performance measures. Since I give everyone 2 weeks to submit their PPR data, this gives us as VISTA leaders 1 week to run down people that may submit late, and potentially up to 2 weeks for the program director to input the data into eGrants prior to the actual due date. The data from the VISTA Excel sheet gets input into the Smartsheet forms, which feeds directly into a Smartsheet. That Smartsheet is then in the order that eGrants requests, which makes input by the program director at United Way Worldwide an easier task. Through the service year, I meet with the VISTAs every month and with the supervisors bi-monthly. I make sure at that time they are keeping track of their PPR data, as well as making sure the VISTA is utilizing their days off. I ask members about their site target and make sure they are keeping track of everything that they are doing. I encourage them to take really good notes as well, so they can explain the numbers if they need to. If a member feels they have nothing to add, I try to help them make sure that all of their VAD activities relate to the PPR requirements as much as possible. To review, creating and presenting a tool such as an Excel spreadsheet to a new VISTA that is set up exactly how the data is required in eGrants is always a good start to stay organized throughout the year. If you have several sites and VISTAs, I found that since it was available at my site, utilizing Smartsheet forms made everyone's life easier, as it took everyone's data and funneled it into one sheet automatically. It took one day of learning how to use it and inputting data to the work for it to work like a well-oiled machine. It did a great job helping me to support reporting this year.
Tammy, thank you so much for sharing your insights, especially on it being clear that you guide your members and help them manage the data. And it really is great to hear some of the specific examples of how you manage it and help your members manage it at your project. So thank you very much for that. Next, we're going to hear from one more leader on some of the things that he's doing to manage data. Our next leader also supports members in data collection and reporting. Sebastian Pruitt is the NCCE VISTA leader serving with the North Carolina Campus Engagement Project at Elon University in Elon, North Carolina. NCCE is a collaborative network of colleges and universities committed to educating students for civic and social responsibility, partnering with communities for positive change, and strengthening democracy. Sebastian, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Eric. I'm happy to be here. I'd like to share some of the ways I manage the data for my project using Google Sheets. As Eric mentioned, I'm serving as the leader for North Carolina Campus Engagement. We are an intermediary sponsor site, and we currently have 12 VISTAs serving at different campus subsites across the state. Our program uses Google Sheets to create a reporting structure. We separate the document into 3 tabs: a time log, a monthly report, and an event tracker, which we'll talk about in just a bit. For the time log, our program includes a way to track time off, including personal and medical days. There are two rows at the bottom that calculate the number of occurrences of S for sick or medical days, or P for personal days within a given range, in this case, the pay period. The totals are calculated at the far right of the sheet. We have found this helps our VISTAs keep a running tab of the time they have used and what's left. We also encourage our members to use this information to budget their time. For example, if a VISTA plans to take a vacation at some point, they can enter the time off in advance. The sheet will then automatically calculate how much time they have left for the rest of their service year. Now I'll talk about some of what we do with our reports. We have our VISTAs report monthly on a separate tab labeled Monthly Report. To help our members understand what they are reporting and how it should be calculated, we include the following. For each of the performance measures that are listed on the far left side of the sheet, we include descriptions of the performance measures and how their site expects them to calculate the data. This provides a reference for the VISTAs to go back to if they find themselves unsure about where to find the data. Another thing we do is include a way to track a VISTA's progress. At the far right of the Monthly Report tab, there are 2 columns called Performance Measure Goal and Year-to-Date Progress. As the name suggests, the Performance Measure Goal shows the year-end goal for each of the performance measures. As an example, one goal could be to accumulate 500 volunteer service hours by the end of the year. The Year-to-Date Progress column includes a formula that totals all the data that has been recorded in that row for that measure. This has proven to be an effective tool for VISTA members to see how far they have come with their different goals. One thing that I will add is that all the performance measures, descriptions, and goals come directly from our subsites. These are criteria that they have chosen and are heavily invested in. We find this helps involve all parties in the reporting process. The last part of our reporting structure that I'm going to talk about is how we have our VISTA members report on their professional development. Our site used to use a single row on the monthly report tab to record our members' professional development. We found that this did not allow enough room to accurately record all the professional development and events that our VISTAs participated in. It also clustered too much information into a difficult to read format. Over the past year, we have changed how we record professional development and now include a separate tab for tracking the information called the Event Tracker. We actually got this idea from a previous VISTA member who also felt that trying to record all of his professional development in one row was a bit too challenging. Instead, he created a separate tab to record details about what he did over his service year, and our site decided to incorporate it into our reporting structure. The Event Tracker includes columns for specific details that we ask our VISTAs to input whenever they participate in some type of professional development or when they coordinate an event. We ask our members to include the date of the training, the title of the training, the organization, the type of development, the length in hours, whether it was virtual or in person, and any notes or links to further information. We also have a column for the member development category that each event falls under for AmeriCorps reporting. We typically work with the VISTAs to determine which categories to use prior to submitting our reports to AmeriCorps. We have found that this structure works well for reporting purposes and provides our VISTA members with a list of marketable skills and experiences that they can use in the future. So that's how we use Google Sheets for 3 different reports: the time log, the monthly report, and the event tracker. I appreciate the opportunity to share these with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's amazing to hear the specifics of how you manage it and make it so much easier for your members to report in these 3 areas. We're now going to turn to our audience to see what good ideas they have to share. So now it's your turn. We'd like to hear from you in the chat one more time. This time, we're going to brainstorm and share practices. Based on your experience and knowledge in working with members, what additional effective reporting and data collection practices can you share? We're pretty sure that those of you who have been leaders for some time now might have developed some effective practices, or maybe it's possible that you've used some that you thought were clever or just made people's lives so much easier, as Sebastian and Tammy shared, making their members so much easier to report. So go ahead and put your ideas in the chat. And again, please make sure you select everyone from the drop-down menu so that we can all see your responses for any effective reporting and data collection practices that you would like to share. It's always great to see your responses, and you never know how your response could help another VISTA leader in their role and in their work. It makes a huge difference. Well, I'm seeing quite a few responses coming in. I'll read a couple. One I think is an amazing idea, having an orientation at the beginning of a member's service to really orient members to data collection and reporting. I know Tammy mentioned that earlier. It's a great idea to help them understand the importance of why they're collecting data and what they're collecting. Another suggestion is using a form from a specific company like Google Form and helping it to really arrange and organize all the data so that members can track it consistently and help collect it over time. And then creating a template to capture the things our program needs to submit throughout the year, not just when the reports are due, but over time to make it easier for the larger data collection when the VISTA reports are due. Andy, anything stand out to you?
Yeah, I'm impressed by the variety again of ideas here, some of the detail that has been shared. A couple things stood out to me. One is someone captures progress notes at the end of each day. So before you walk out that door and things have a chance to evaporate from your mind, just jotting it down, getting it captured somewhere so that you've got that sort of contemporaneous record of what you've been doing, what you've accomplished, and where things are. Another one I want to call out, someone mentioned getting photos and images, right? So it's one thing to have numbers, even to have narratives, but sometimes, you know, photos worth 1,000 words. Having those kinds of images can be really helpful, not only for AmeriCorps reports, because they can be submitted along with narratives, but for more broadly for communications that you're doing about what the project has accomplished, about what members are doing and where their successes have been. So, so you know, effective data capture can take lots of forms. So really grateful to see all these different ideas here. All right, so thank you all for participating. Keep your ideas coming if you've got them partway through. But first, Eric has one more question for you.
Yes, I do. And the last question is really just to see how well you have been following along. On your screen in just a second, you'll see a poll pop up with a question. And the question is asking, which of the following is an appropriate way for a leader to support data collection and reporting? Is it track data on behalf of members, empower members to design their own reporting tools, collect data from members quarterly, or is it demonstrate how to use reporting tools? You can go ahead and make your selection and click submit, and we'll give you a little bit of time to do that now. Seeing a lot of responses coming in now. Again, please make sure when you select your answer, make sure to click the submit button. We'll still give you a few more seconds to submit. I see several other comments coming in, so just wanted to remind you, click the radio button to select your answer and then click submit so your answer comes through. We'll give you a few more seconds and then we'll continue. Okay, I think most people have submitted a response, so we will go ahead and close the poll now. Thank you for responding. And we'll go ahead and look at the correct answer. The correct answer to this question is D. Demonstrate how to use reporting tools. Remember that as VISTA leaders, you won't track data on behalf of members, have members design their own reporting tools, or only collect data quarterly. You will do that more often. So thank you again for responding to that question. I'll pass it over to Andy, who's going to provide some recommendations for further study.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. So we do have a few recommended resources on this topic. Links to these resources are included with the slides. They're at the very end of that document. So you just have one thing to download, the slides, and you'll see the link to that file is there in the chat. Thank you, Steve. So first up, we have some VISTA resources. For details on the 2 AmeriCorps reports that VISTA projects submit, take a look at the reporting instructions for both the PPR and the DPRS. Then we have a couple of articles on managing and understanding data. I need to give the disclaimer that this is not an official endorsement of these resources because AmeriCorps did not create those resources. But if you're interested in seeing some examples of performance measures, we suggest you review some examples from the Office of Management and Budget. And Microsoft has a resource with recommendations on how to clean your data set. Again, links to these are included at the end of the slides document. And now I'd like to invite Sebastian to come back to talk about a different type of resource for VISTA leaders, one that was actually created by VISTA leaders. Sebastian?
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, there is a group of VISTA leaders who get together over Zoom every month to talk about different topics related to VISTA Leader Service. The group is currently led by Madeline Loki, a VISTA leader with Catholic Charities USA, and me. We also gather input from participants to pick the topics for upcoming meetings. We're always welcoming new leaders, and I highly encourage anyone who is interested to email us for more information. I will add that Madeline and I will be wrapping up our service year soon, by the end of October, so we are looking for new leadership.
Thank you for that, Sebastian. I wish that resource was around when I served as a VISTA leader, but I see things are getting better and better, so that is wonderful to hear. And we'll get to your questions in just a moment, but first I do invite you to complete a short evaluation of this webinar. Your feedback is extremely appreciated and helpful as we make these sessions most useful for you and other VISTA leaders. You'll probably already see the survey open in your browser window, but if not, you can click on the link in the chat. And again, we appreciate your responses in advance. For the Q&A session, we will use the chat feature. So again, you can post any questions you have in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. If you don't see the chat panel, you can move your cursor to the bottom of the screen and click on the chat icon. A couple of questions came in initially. Tammy, the first one I will direct to you. You were talking about smart sheets and how that really worked for your process and your members. The question is it possible for you to make any of those smart sheet templates available for others to use or to reference?
I could probably do that. The thing is, I think each of the sites kind of track different things. So it almost would have to be going into the eGrants of your site and like seeing what exactly is being tracked to do that in the order. But the beginning part, yeah, I mean, it's just their name and everything.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure it is true that different projects track different things and it's not always the same. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for that offer, Tammy. You and I can connect afterwards and figure out the best way for us to share that. So you won't have to do that on your own. I can facilitate the sharing part and just we can connect on the best way to make that happen.
Thank you, Andy. And actually that answers partially the second question. There was a question for Sebastian about mentioning the resources that he had in the time tracking Excel file. First is if Sebastian is even willing to make that available or if he has an access to it. And then Andy, you answered the second part about collaborating to make sure you can make it work. So Sebastian, I'll turn to you to find out if that tracking tool you used is available or accessible.
I mean, I can absolutely share it with the people of the training team for the webinar and see if there's a way to get that out to everyone. Kind of similar to what Tammy was talking about with her form, ours are set up with specific performance measures that our subsites have picked, but it's absolutely adaptable to whatever your projects track. So I can see if there's a way to get that to everybody, to anybody who wants it.
Great, that is so helpful, Sebastian. Thank you, and thank you, Tammy. That's the one thing that I know is true about VISTA leaders is how generous they are in sharing their expertise, as both of you have done today, and being willing to share some of the resources and procedures and processes that you've created. So I want to thank you both for making those available, and for everyone on the call. I'll be doing follow-up communication probably next week so that I have a chance to get the materials from Tammy and Sebastian, but watch your email and you'll be getting a copy of those materials. I want to see if there are other questions out there. We've got a few minutes left, and Tammy and Sebastian, your peers who are doing this work on a daily basis are here at your disposal, so want to make sure you have the opportunity to take full advantage of that. So if you have a question, drop it in the chat.
Yes, I echo those sentiments. I know the topic of reporting and data collection is very, very important, and a lot of work goes into it. So if there are any questions, please type them in the chat. I'm guessing people are thinking. A lot on their minds. It was a very, very useful webinar. We'll pause just for a few more seconds. I see some comments coming in the chat, just checking back through to make sure we didn't miss any questions, or if there's questions on your mind at the last minute that you have for Sebastian or Tammy. Just want to leave a few more seconds to make sure we have a chance to get to one or two more if necessary. Okay. Well, thank you very much for all of those great questions. And before we let you go, I do want to invite you to our next webinar. So as you can see on the screen, our next webinar for VISTA leaders is about supporting members from a distance. It'll take place on Thursday, October 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope that you'll be able to join us. I do want to give a huge thank you to our guest speakers, Tammy Moyer and Sebastian Pruitt, and our presenter, Andy King, for sharing with us today. Also, thank you very much to our instructional designers, Bethany Dusablon and Elizabeth Floyd, and our producer, Stephen Gray. And thank you very much for participating in today's webinar. That concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining and have a wonderful day.